What happens when law, business, and life collide? Each week on Lead Counsel, your host Tom Tona will take a deep dive into topics related to the law, the business of law, and life. There will be insightful discussions with industry insiders, experts, and thought leaders making significant contributions and meaningful differences in their fields of expertise. Tom is the founder and managing attorney at TonaLaw. He has been a practicing attorney since 1994 and the leader of TonaLaw since it opened in 2001. The goal of this podcast is to provide you with free information on law and the business of law, and to give you actionable tools related to each of these areas. Now, here's Tom.
Hey, welcome back to the Lead Counsel Podcast. Your host, Tom Tona. Before we jump into today's topic, I just want to take a minute to thank the sponsors of the podcast. This episode is sponsored by TonaLaw. They're not just another law firm. They're defining what it means to fight for their clients. We get a lot of attorney referrals from across the country. We pay fee participation in all jurisdictions where it's permitted. We focus on integrity, innovation, and relentless advocacy. TonaLaw is proving that the business of law can scale without losing its heart. If you want to see how a modern firm is built for impact and happy client referrals, check out TonaLaw.com. Mention again the Lead Counsel Podcast, and I'm happy to get on the phone with you. This episode is also brought to you by Meet Gabby, the voice AI built for law firms. Gabby answers your phones 24/7, qualifies leads, and books consultations so you never miss another client. Imagine cutting intake time in half or giving every caller a 5-star experience. That's the power of Meet Gabby. Learn more at meetgabby.com. Mention the Lead Counsel Podcast. You can also hit me up, and I'm glad to make an introduction to the owner. We are here with the experts in succession planning. They're not allowed to call themselves experts. Well, two of them are not because they're lawyers, but I can call them experts because that's what they are. So we've got Daniel Feiman, succession planning expert, John Hawkins and Ed Alexander, both specialists in the area of law firm transitioning and succession planning and all that good stuff. Welcome, gentlemen. How are we today?
Great, John.
Doing well.
Welcome. So, all right. So we're going to jump right back in. We'll just do a quick recap. We covered why law firms fail at succession planning, recognizing early warning signs, and what modern succession planning looks like. And then today we're just going to jump right into, the actual meat and potatoes of building a succession plan and what that looks like. You guys actually, I will thank you all, got me motivated to actually show up for my call with Dan. Dan will attest, not only did I not go off the rails or down a rabbit hole, I stuck to the plan. Right, Dan?
I will confirm, yes, Tom, for the first time in a long time, we stuck to the agenda.
We stuck to the plan. I also realize I'm paying for all these rabbit holes I go down. I'm still not getting my succession planning done, so I want to get it done.
Well, I'm going to go back to Jonathan's suggestion. You just write me a big check for the whole thing. And
Yeah, there you go.
Then your heart and soul will be committed.
I just listened to that episode and I still feel the same way about Jonathan after him volunteering that. But I am motivated at this point. What was cool was the process that you took me through. So it's a good entree into building a succession plan step by step. Now, John and Ed, I know you guys come in typically. Do you do the planning like Dan does, or do you typically come in on the transactional side to paper everything up?
For me, I'm more on the papering up side. I'm not going to be in there like Dan is on, I call it the operational.
The planning, the actual strategic planning.
Yeah. So
what about you?
I do the planning piece. I think the unique part about where we approach it is I also have that brokerage and valuation firm. And so we'll do that valuation piece that's so essential to really making that plan work so that the current owner can figure out where are we today and where do we want to go to implement the plan.
So let's talk about it right out of the gate, because that's one of the things. So I'm on that competing platform to you, right? They're a brokerage, they're online, which is kind of cool. But here's what I'm finding. Very few sellers actually have an idea of what it's truly worth. And I'm starting the conversation after talking to Dan with, do you have a valuation you'd be willing to share? Right? Because how am I supposed to know what I'm bidding on, what I'm looking at? So I think that missing piece is where they want to make their money, that other brokerage, but they've got to convince the sellers to like put some pen to paper. They're listing these practices for 4 million, 5 million, like it's not a lot of money. And Dan's laughing because I was showing him what I was dealing with. So Ed, you start with that process with evaluation?
I think you got to start with it because at the end of the day, the numbers drive whether this is going to work or not work at all, right? And
right.
And the problem I found, which is exactly what you're talking about here, is that law firm owners look at this as though they were selling a tech company sometimes, right?
Right.
And so, we want 5 or 6 or 7 times EBITDA. Well, it just doesn't work that way, right? And so we got to get them down to reality. But to address the issue that you just mentioned, like if you're out there looking to acquire a firm, right? And when you do that, you should be handed some measure of financial information. So
you should.
Yeah, you should.
Okay.
and you should be able to do a bit of a back of the napkin approach. Now, of course, it's going to be under NDA, right? So you can't be going spreading all that information out. But you should be able to, you should be able to take that, do a back of the napkin approach. We do evaluations like that all the time. That gives you an idea, is the owner smoking crack or are they, in reality, right?
Right. I may use this podcast to kind of send it out to people as they start kicking tires. So let's start with the first question that I would ask all three of you, which is if a firm was to start tomorrow, what's your opinion about where they begin?
All right. I'll pick that one up because it's such a softball. Where do you want to go? I mean, Tom, you've got a firm. In every firm owner that I talk to, the founders, I say, where do you want to go with this practice? Do you plan to die under your desk? Do you want to build towards a legacy? Do you want to build a succession plan for the firm and then a transition plan for yourself? Until they can answer those questions, there's no purpose in creating a succession because they have no direction. So I like people to sit down, take some time, think about it, and actually write out the answer to those questions. Once they're clear on where they want to take the firm, then it's much easier to start to build a succession plan to achieve what their goal is. Without a goal, we're just, spitting in the wind.
Right.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, you got to have a place to head to. Otherwise, you're just kind of moving around in different directions, right?
Yeah.
I'll give a little contrary opinion on this. I agree with that, but I think, for example, a younger attorney, let's say in the mid-30s, they may not know at this point where they want to end up. But I still think there are things they can do and plan to set their firms up to where they can be in a position later on when they do know where they want to go. So, for example, the way you design your firm or organize your firm, I think we talked about last time, the less the firm depends on the owner, the more valuable and the more opportunities they have to get out of it would be one piece. Another piece would be get your personal financial house in order. So then you have options. A lot of people, they're in so much debt, they spend all their money, they can't transition. So they have no options, even if they think they know where they want to go. So those are two things I think even the young attorneys out there, young law firm owners can do today.
Yeah, I also think, so Dan and I, without giving away too much of my own personal stuff, Dan's got charts and spreadsheets for everything. Like when I say there's a system there, I was a little bit blown away. He's like, oh, look at what I've been working on for you. And I was like, oh my God. It was this long, lengthy spreadsheet, but I had asked him the simple question of what's my out number? And I would love if people that are listening to this, especially, it doesn't even matter what age. It could be 30, it could be 40, it could be 50. Determining your out number. What number am I good if I sell or liquidate everything today? And what am I living off of income wise, right? And what do I need to live? And it was an eye-opening exercise. And the cool thing was, because I had heard a guy talking online saying so many of the entrepreneurs he works with are actually past it. And that's exactly what happened with Dan and I. I found out that my out number, which I think we still have to tweak a little bit, I'm already past it. So I said to my wife, I go, it's a great sense of freedom right now that I feel that, because Dan, you brought up a concept that I'd love to explore with these guys, which is the non-income producing years or income draining years. What was it that you called?
Yeah, I've just finished reading a book called The Four Horsemen of Retirement. And he talks about the earning years and the spending years. The earning years are up to when you decide to retire, 55, 60, 70, whatever. And then you move into the spending years where it's outflow and no inflow. And today, fortunately or unfortunately, most people are living longer than we used to. And if you retire at 65 and don't realize that A, you might live to 85, 90, 95,
Right.
and B, as we get a little more, shall we say, vintage, mature, elderly, what you spend on medical goes up astronomically. So your out number has to include how long you expect to live. Are you going to maintain the same lifestyle, and taking into consideration, how tax rates could change, how your health could change, etc. So you have to look at that very differently. When do you plan to walk away, and how long do you think reasonably that you're going to be around? And he brings up an interesting stat. This book was only published 2 weeks ago, so these are current stats. An average couple where the husband and wife are both 65 plus, there's better than a 50% chance and at least one of them will live to 92. So you're looking at maybe 30 years of outflow,
Right.
little to no inflow, unless you've got passive income and you include that in your calculations to make sure you don't outlive your money.
Yeah. And again, even though we talk about the 30s and 40s, I've always had that kind of outlook. Like when I started my practice, I was like, I want to sell, right? And I still feel that way eventually. I think you start businesses to sell them most of the time. And so I always had the benefit, which is why I've always been a big real estate guy. I love the idea of passive income, all of that stuff. So I would encourage anybody in their 30s, 40s, even 50s. Real estate's been fantastic. Most of the people I know that have accumulated massive amounts of wealth, it's always been tied to real estate because you've got that passive income. It's secure. It's for savings. Even if you own your own practice, right? Like, I don't know if you guys own your buildings that you're in. Do you own it, Ed?
Yeah, I do.
Right. So what I love, and John, you're saying no. I mean, how old are you, John? You're behind us by gotta be 15 years, right?
I'll turn 50 in February. I'll say.
Oh, all right.
So I'm good there, man.
So you about, but I will tell you, like,
But I feel 35, baby. I feel 35.
And you look fantastic. I was going to say something about Dan. I can't, but when I went to meet Dan for dinner in California, I'll just do a quick side note. I went to meet him in California. Dan's video, it's hard to see. He's like 6'4", all muscle. I'm like, dude, are you on TRT? What the holy hell? Like, he looks like Magnum PI and he's 6'4", jacked. And I was like, good Lord, like, I hope I'm looking like this when I'm Dan's vintage. I'll use vintage because he's definitely in great shape. But as an aside, John, what was explained to me about the building purchase, and one of the reasons I did it, my accountant said, even if you sold it for 50% of what you bought it for, it's for savings, right? So Ed, was the thinking for you when you bought the building?
Ultimately, it's a store against inflation. That's really why we bought it, right?
Right.
So, yeah. But I wanted to add something in just to Daniel's point. The book that I really enjoy is Die with Zero, and because it really addresses that issue of oversaving or undersaving, right? And trying to thread that needle, which is a huge needle, because honestly, you really don't know what you're going to spend in retirement. So it's really fascinating there. On the point that Jonathan was making with the 30 and 40-year-olds, the key for that really is the partnership agreement, because you only get one chance to bake in and exit into the partnership agreement. And so you got to do it the right way. If you're going to be in partnership for a long, long time, you got to make sure that retirement piece is built into it from day one.
Yeah, you said something. I think it was you that used the missing middle as a big risk that you see. And man, that has just stuck in my head where I started talking about it with Dan. Like, that spoke volumes to me. And I just keep repeating it over and over as a big risk factor, that missing middle, right, and trying to fill that demographic.
Yeah.
Right. If you want longevity for internal succession and all of that stuff. So I think that it's never too young to start. I think that based upon what you guys are saying, and I think it was John, you, and possibly you, Dan, which was the life insurance piece. Who said that last time when we were talking about having life insurance as part of the succession planning?
We probably all did, but
Yeah. Again, something that I found really, really helpful was going to a knowledgeable insurance broker, right? The right person did a very tiered approach to it, where they said, okay, your prime earning years, God forbid, today is the day you drop. You've got all this coverage. As you start to age, every 10-year window, we can drop one of the layers off, becomes less expensive for you, but there's still going to be tails there that will compensate for what would need to happen in your practice, with your family, all of that. So I found that all of this stuff that came out of those last conversations was gold. And then actually sitting down to do it with Dan, where he had these charts and sheets and all of this stuff. It was really good because I had a concrete view. What was the other exercise that we were doing, Dan, from a planning perspective?
The critical roles worksheet?
Yeah. So he basically goes seat by seat. And then he has all of these factors as far as who's critical, what is their experience in terms of rarity in the marketplace, all these formulas. Like, I didn't realize how much work really went into all of what he does until I looked behind the curtain. I was like, oh man, it's a ton of planning, but it's super valuable. Like, it gives you scoring and tangible results on where your risk factors are.
So, Tom, let me ask you this. For other attorneys out there that may be thinking about the planning, since you're sort of going through the process, how has it changed the way you're thinking about your approach to the firm now, or has it?
It has, to the extent that once I actually had some more knowledge about what I was sitting on from a valuation perspective, about the numbers I had already achieved on investing and all of that stuff, it took a huge weight off my shoulders because I was like, I could literally just move to Paris tomorrow and sell this or piece it out and fraction it off if I want. I realized there's a lot more options there. Ed and I had a conversation years ago. We have a friend who did what I have deemed a no money merger, where they didn't realize any equitable value from the event that they closed, right? And I never understood that. And Ed and I have talked about it before on the podcast, where that happens out there a lot more from probably a lack of this type of planning, right? Because every practice, there's an inherent value, whether it's just the inventory or the goodwill or the marketplace. And I just think that in your 30s, 40s, and 50s, you should be talking to people that do this on the regular. Right? Have a consultation with Dan, even if it's once a month in your 30s. And he says, listen, you just need life insurance right now, whatever it is. But you guys also need to be part of the picture. I think to the extent, like, I used to worry, I'm going on vacation. God forbid the plane goes down. Who takes care of my practice? Mm-hmm. I had none of that. Now I have a different scenario where I have a management team. I'm bringing on a COO. So God forbid, there's a ton of people that will be able to move this in the right direction. But I also need to get the plan in place so my wife knows the plan. Right. So to answer your question, John, it gave me a lot of freedom, and I would have loved to have done this and buttoned it up earlier rather than where I'm doing it now, to be honest with you.
And sorry, I don't want to hijack this, but another thing you just mentioned about the team you've got in place. Now, law firms are different than technology firms, as Ed has already said. But in the technology world, companies sometimes acquire other companies just for the teams, just for the people. So if you build a really good team, even if you've got hardly any inventory or whatever, that in and of itself might be something that somebody wants.
Funny that you say that, because like I said, I want to bring on somebody to do the acquisitions. I'm not just looking to acquire the inventory. I'm looking to acquire the talent, as long as it's a talent and it blends with the culture, right? Which I'm sure Dan probably has spreadsheets for that too. So, but again, there's so many moving complexities to this in terms of, it all sounds great on paper, but this is a way more complex process, I think. Quick break to thank Meet Gabby, the voice AI that answers your phone, screen leads, and books consults 24/7. They'll even send out retainers if the person on the other end of the phone asks for a retainer. If intake is slowing you down, check out meetgabby.com. This episode is supported by TonaLaw, a modern law firm built on integrity and innovation. Learn how they're changing the game at TonaLaw.com. Attorney referrals accepted from across the country. You'll see what it's like when you send us a case. You'll have some happy clients. So going back for a second. So, okay, it sounds like the right time to start these conversations is as soon as possible, right? Not when you're worrying about, are you going to make payroll, but more, you've gotten over that hurdle, right? Payroll's made, you're doing well. Do the planning as early as possible. So the next question would be, who should be at the table for those conversations? Dan, I'll start with you. Because I know who you've met with in my team and in my family, but I'll start with you as far as who should be at the table conversation.
We usually look at what the firm considers their leadership team. Who really are the, quote, leaders of the organization currently. So if you got 3 different practice areas, you've probably got a managing attorney in each practice area. You may have a COO. You may have an overall managing partner. Who is the brain trust of the organization? Because we're talking about firm-wide succession first, then individual transition plan within that. So I'm a big believer in the Intel model. Intel used to bring a new chip to the market, and then instantly it was obsolete because somebody else was bringing the next chip to market. So 20 years ago, they came up with the concept of the day they release their new chip, they start working on replacing it. Well, Ed's brought up, Jonathan's brought up the fact that a number of firms have come to them fairly late in the game, individual founders, and I've seen the same thing. You can definitely struggle if you go to the planning table too late, but you can't go too early.
There's no such thing as going too early.
Not at all. Because again, you can do it piecemeal. You can do what you need to do today. But Ed brought up a great point. In fact, Ed and his partner had an excellent podcast that I was listening to the other day, talking about on the valuation side as well as the partnership side. If you have a partnership agreement and you've got life insurance in there, you got to fund the life insurance. Ed, wasn't there a situation where they had it in the agreement but never got around to funding it?
Never got around to funding it. And, it was funny. Well, not funny, actually, because the one partner was actually basically killed in a motorcycle accident.
God.
And so all of a sudden the spouse became the partner of the remaining founder. And so, yeah, it was brutal.
So really quick, break it down for somebody like me. You have two partners. They do some kind of paperwork that says they have to get life insurance on each other. Break down the mechanics of that so that people listening to this, 30s or 40s, they're young with one partner. Give me the mechanics of what you just talked about with funding of life insurance and what that even looks like. Is this a buy-sell agreement? What does that look like?
Yeah. So in the partnership agreement, you should have a buy-sell provision. And that buy-sell provision can take two flavors. One is what's called a cross purchase, and one is called a redemption. And in the cross purchase, if Jonathan and I are partners, Jonathan owns a policy on my life, I own a policy on his. And when I pass away, Jonathan uses the funds and it's protected because there's a collateral estoppel in there. But Jonathan is then forced to use those funds to buy out my spouse. And so Jonathan owns 100%, and he's basically got this pool of money that came from the sky, right? And he bought me out. And that's the easiest scenario. When you have multiple partners, it can get a little bit more complicated. And so in that case, we often will go to a redemption model where the law firm owns the policy. And when I pass away, the law firm has the obligation to buy me out. And again, we protect that from the creditors through various mechanisms to make sure that nobody can get their hands on it, right?
Right.
And I think it's important to recognize that there are really two policies here, because I hear a lot of times people will say, oh, I've got a key man policy. Well, really, there's a policy to buy out the partner. There's maybe part of the same policy, but typically not. There's a policy to make up for the harm that's going to befall the firm when that key partner dies, right? And then as a key partner, you've got to have your own insurance policy to protect your family from the income that they lost. So there's at least two and maybe three policies in this process. And of course, it's always easier to get them when you're in your 30s and 40s than it is when you're in your 60s.
Okay. So as somebody who's approaching that age, I'm not there yet. You said there were complexities where there's more than one partner. What about a scenario where there are no partners and it's just the guy at the top who's trying to figure out who could buy the practice or not? Like, what kind of protections are there? Do you do it with another practice? Do you do it with internal people? Like, what does that look like?
So there are two scenarios that we can go there, right? So if you have a corresponding competitor who understands your practice area, who's willing to do it, you can do an external buy-sell arrangement with insurance policies. That's typically done, I see, on a smaller firm level, not on a large firm level. And then the way to protect yourself internally, right? So you've got this nice asset, the law firm is producing profits, not earned income, but profits for your family that have to be protected.
Right.
You can do a scenario where the law firm will have a policy and will effectively buy you out, or you just maintain a different policy that you personally own, right? And you need to definitely, if you got a large firm, go to an estate planning lawyer and figure out the best tax advantage way to make that happen.
Okay.
And let me throw in a couple little wrinkles too that I've seen. So let's say you've got, let's say, Tom, you more senior attorney, you've got someone internally that might take the mantle and you have some policy in place to sort of do the buy sell or whatever, and maybe give some bridge capital to the firm. Scenario I've seen from time to time, particularly in sort of the high end, really complex plaintiff practices, there's like a $2 million line of credit that the firm may use to fund experts in their big cases.
Right.
And this young internal sort of person may not have the credit worthiness to step into that role or the risk tolerance to say, all right, I'm going to quote, buy Tom out. But then all of a sudden I've got to sign up for a $2 million line of credit just to keep this thing going. So that's a whole other issue that needs, in some firms needs to be addressed.
Yeah. So then, okay, that then leads me to the next question, which is, and I think we talked about it. So you're going to want to be having conversations with the leadership team, the spouse, potentially a good insurance broker, I think is part of the game plan for this, right? Is there anybody else that you would say is indispensable to these conversations at the outset, other than like a Sherpa like you guys to kind of guide the process, right?
I think Ed mentioned, I don't know if you mentioned it there, the trust and estates or tax attorney.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. Yep.
And of course, CPA, because we need to understand the tax and financial situation.
Right.
The reason, Tom, that you need all these different experts in their given areas, you're really trying to optimize the firm. And in order to do that, you need enough time. So whether we're talking 30s, 40s, 50s, whatever the age bracket is, if you truly want to optimize the value of the firm, optimize the options, optimize what you can walk away with, you have to be engaging all of these professionals early enough because circumstances change, rules change, laws change. And just like your trust, you don't have a trust put together when you're 25 and don't look at it till the week before you die.
Unless you may.
So engage early with the right professionals, leverage and use them over time so you can get the best possible result for yourself. Be selfish.
Yeah. And again, that kind of goes back to what you were saying, John, which is I felt a tremendous amount of control / understanding and clarity just even after the last call with Dan, because it wasn't me avoiding the work. It was me realizing, the work is not that bad once you get deep into it, right? You rip the Band-Aid off and you're like, I think too many people, especially with the PI lawyers, they're like, cases are always going to be coming. The money's always going to be flowing. And then they're the ones that get wrapped around a pole or something like that. And not realizing what they could have done if they did optimize it, right? Like the amount of freedom that I felt for the first time in a long time when I talked to, I think we met on Friday, Dan?
Yep.
And I said to my wife, we hit the out number. We hit the out number in a very comfortable margin. And I was like, I'm very relaxed now. Now it just felt good to have that knowledge because then you have options. Then there's a lot of options there, right? So let's land the plane with this. Anybody that's listening to this, what do you think is the biggest pitfall at the outset of doing this other than sticking your head in the sand and not doing it? Like whether you're 30, 40, or 50, biggest mistake people can avoid from the outset to get this rolling. As, by the way, I have most of you guys on retainers for all of this stuff, right? So like, I've always taken a team approach to running the business. I have an ethics guy. I got a transactional guy. I got Dan, and I've worked with Ed in the past on the brokerage side, even though he probably will never touch New York again with his experience in New York. But pitfalls to avoid. Pick your top one that you would say, hey, listen, just do X to get the momentum going.
All right, I'll start. I mean, I would say doing something is probably better than nothing. So get going. The next thing would be doing something and then never looking at it again for 20 years is probably,
all right.
Shouldn't do that. But so it's something that even once you think you've done it, every few years you should dust it off because things change.
I think there's a mindset issue that I encounter a lot of times when I'm doing these things. We have to push people to the finish line because on some level, there's a little bit of thinking like estate planning lawyers suffer, right? Is that if I really think about this, it actually might happen, right? And so you just got to keep pushing because there's just some level of, I might live forever. Why am I doing this, right?
And no one lives forever.
No
one lives forever. Dan, go ahead. Wrap it up. Land it for us.
Ed, you just reminded me of something. My grandfather was a great attorney, and he did trust and estates. He had a general practice, but a lot of trust and estates. When he died after his 5th bypass in his late 80s, he died without a trust.
Oh, my God.
Oh, wow.
Because that was his mentality, and it caused some interesting challenges. So that's really personal for me. But I'll go back to Jonathan's point. Get started with a professional, because a professional will have the tools, have the experience, but also hold you accountable. The biggest challenge that I see with firms is when they try to do it themselves, it's always manana. Well, we got to put out this fire, we got to prepare for this case, etc. You keep kicking the can down the road, and suddenly ain't no more can. So having an external Sherpa, an external professional who can hold you accountable will put you in a much better stead of getting through some steps, some planning, and then it can always evolve after that.
All right, that's a good place to end it, actually, fellas. I appreciate it. You tune in next time because we're going to be talking about that mindset issue. So thanks for coming on. We got John Hawkins, Daniel Feiman, Ed Alexander. All their links will be in the show notes. Highly recommend. They've all got books or are coming out with books. I know, John, you're coming out with your book in October.
Yes, supposed to be. Right. We'll see.
October, November. Let's give you a little wiggle room. But, Dan has a series of books. Ed has a book. I highly recommend that, that might be the first step, just picking up the book and getting over the inertia of doing nothing. Too many lawyers are, like Dan said, and John's told stories, and everybody's been talking about these horror stories. Too many lawyers just think they're going to live forever. They're leaving money on the table. They're just leaving money on the table. So next episode, tune in. We're going to be talking about overcoming resistance and the mindset and the difficult conversations. Thanks, fellas. Thank you for listening to this episode of Lead Counsel Podcast. Your host, Tom Tona. Go anywhere podcasts are distributed. Follow us. Leave us a 10-star review. Share some episodes with your friends. And thanks for listening. I appreciate it. Thank you. This episode is sponsored by TonaLaw. They're not just another law firm. They're defining what it means to fight for their clients. We get a lot of attorney referrals from across the country. We pay fee participation in all jurisdictions where it's permitted. We focus on integrity, innovation, and relentless advocacy. TonaLaw is proving that the business of law can scale without losing its heart. Do you want to see how a modern firm is built for impact and happy client referrals? Check out TonaLaw.com. Mention again the Lead Counsel Podcast, and I'm happy to get on the phone with you. This episode is also brought to you by Meet Gabby, the voice AI built for law firms. Gabby answers your phones 24/7, qualifies leads, and books consultations so you never miss another client. Imagine cutting intake time in half while giving every caller a 5-star experience. That's the power of Meet Gabby. Learn more at meetgabby.com. Mention the Lead Counsel Podcast. You can also hit me up, and I'm glad to make an introduction to the owner.